here in Brampton at Greenway by Rivera, and I'm excited to show you some of the recipes that we do here at our residence. So to start off, we're gonna make apple citrus loaf, and we're gonna head into butternut squash soup. So we're going with the fall theme here, but most of the items are available year long. We have the advantage of living in Ontario, so most of the items are available. We're gonna start off with some green apples, some Granny Smiths. We're gonna start with peeling them. Fun fact about Granny Smiths, they started off in Australia. They were named after a lady named, well, Anne Smith. We're gonna peel, core. So what we're gonna do is prepare basically an apple pie filling, and we're gonna put it in a loaf. As far as the apple pie filling goes, you can make plenty of it beforehand. You can store it in your fridge. It's good for weeks. You could have it with a snack. You could have it with a plain loaf or anything you'd like. We're not gonna put a lot of ingredients in this. We want to leave it a little bit on the plain side so we can use it for different things in the future. The Granny Smiths are nice and tart apples. They're not too sweet, but gives us the advantage of adding as much sugar as we like and sweetening it as much as we'd like to sweeten it. Alright, so we have 4 apples here that we're gonna peel off. Now typical apple pie filling will be sliced apples. We're gonna dice the apples instead, because when you're slicing a loaf, you don't want the slices to get in the way. I'll explain that a little bit later. But it makes sense to dice it, to me. If you prefer slicing the apples, you could of course slice them. You could go any way you'd like with them. Just keep in mind that the apples will need to be cooked accordingly. If they're slices, they'll need to be cooked a little bit longer as well. Diced apples it'll cook faster. So we're done with peeling all our apples. We're gonna core them, dice them, and since we're only doing 4 apples, we don't really have to worry about treating it with lemon juice. But most of you probably know if you don't treat the apples with lemon juice or lime juice, they will discolor, they will oxidize pretty quickly. So I'm chopping up the apples, not that small, not that large. It's about 3/4 of an inch. So we're gonna cut up all the apples. We're just gonna finish cutting up these apples. Apple pie filling is just so easy to make. And it's so versatile. You can use it with, you can just spread it on a piece of toast. Have it with your ice cream. You can just warm up a little bit. You can store some in a jar, keep it in your fridge. It's a nice thing to have around. So, we're gonna get rid of these from the board. We're gonna start off our apple pie filling. Pretty straightforward. We're gonna start off with about 750 milliliters of water. And this water is just cool water. It's or at room temperature at best, because we're going to be mixing cornstarch in this, so you don't want it to be hot. Alrighty. Get our apples ready. So here we have some cornstarch. This is 3/4 of a cup of cornstarch. Sorry, did I say 3/4? I mean half a cup of cornstarch. Gonna give this a stir. Make sure it's nicely diluted in that water. No lumps. And we're gonna turn on the stove. You can put it up on high. Cornstarch only activates when it starts boiling, so we want it to really boil really hard. We have 1.5 cups of white sugar, and I've just added a pinch of nutmeg to it. A lot of people like nutmeg and cinnamon in their apple pie filling. Cinnamon is great, but for our recipe today, I'm not going to add any cinnamon. And we're just going to wait for this to boil. While that's boiling, we can start on our cake mix. So while our liquid is coming to a boil, we're going to start with our basic cake mix in the meanwhile. Over here we have 3 cups of sugar, 1.5 cups of butter. And we're just going to cream it all together. If you'd like to cut back on the sugar, by all means, go for it. We're also adding the sweetened apple pie filling to this loaf, so a little less sugar in the cake mix won't go unnoticed, really. So now that we've mixed our sugar with our butter, we're gonna grab some eggs. And we'll drop in the eggs one at a time. I'll just crack them out here first, just to make sure. Always want to crack your eggs in a separate bowl, just in case you get some shells in them. Did I? Nope. Almost got a shell in it. Alright, so we have 4 eggs here. You can drop them in one by one, or what I like to do is I like to whisk them all together separately in a separate bowl. And gradually add it to the mix over here. the eggs are in. Once your eggs are in, we're going to add our flour. And this is 4 teaspoons of baking powder into the flour. We have a cup of milk here as well. You can mix up our dry ingredients first in here. That's just the baking powder with the flour. In with the wet. At this point, it's going to be a very thick batter. We're going to go ahead and add our 1 cup of milk. Get it all nice and smooth. We don't want it to boil just yet, it's just starting to bubble a little bit. So I'm gonna add in our apples. And because these are diced apples, they will cook a lot quicker. And our cake batter is almost ready. So we have our apples cooking off over here. If you notice that the liquid thickening up a little too much, you could add a little bit of water. Not too much, you want to keep it nice and thick in the end. The end product's meant to be mainly apples with just a little bit of that sugary coating on it. We'll continue with our cake batter here. And so far it's just been a very plain cake batter. We're gonna jazz it up a little bit. We're gonna start with 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And some pumpkin seeds. Some cranberries, now how much cranberries you put in or pumpkin seeds you put in is entirely up to you. It depends on how nutty you like it, how fruity you like it. You could even change up the toppings. You could add candied fruit peel. You could add anything you like at this point. That's going to be a little hard and not going to shed out too much liquid. I love orange zest in these, so I don't have a fancy zester. I'm just going to use a grater here and get some orange zest. So for the amount of loaf that we're making, I think 1 orange and half a lemon should be plenty of zest. Again, it depends on the size of your orange and lemon and how much you like in your loaf. Let's get all that orange goodness and lemony goodness out. Now, after you've mixed it up, if you feel that you need a little more orange, you could go ahead and add some. I'm just gonna finish getting the little bit of zest left on this one. I think this is just the right amount for us. Don't forget about your apples. They may need a little stir. They may need some water in there. We're just gonna give it a little stir. And it looks like the amount of liquid it's plentiful at this point, so we're just gonna let it boil off a little bit, let it keep thickening. You may want to give it a taste as well. Be careful, it is boiling hot at this point and the cornstarch will stick. So I would suggest taking some out with a fork and let it cool down. So I think the amount of sugar we have on this is just great. The amount of liquid is a little excessive, so we're gonna let it simmer down. And we're gonna let the liquid evaporate. So we have our cake mix ready. We have some pumpkin seeds, cranberries, orange zest, lemon zest in it. I like to use a ladle when I'm portioning these out. It just gives me an even portion throughout my loaves. We're going to use some loaf pans. Our apple pie filling has now cooled down. Make sure it's cooled down thoroughly. We cannot use it while it's warm. So we're going to use these loaf pans. You could choose to grease them and dust it with flour. I like using parchment paper. Or you could choose to dust them or grease them and use parchment at the same time. I'll show you a little trick with these little sheets. If you stick them in like that, you'll get a few more creases on the sides and you'll have that little fold in there, and the batter kind of gets stuck in there sometimes, and it's not, your loaf doesn't end up looking as great. So what I like to do is cut 4 slits in the 4 corners. That way, I'll show you what I mean. So you go outwards at roughly a 45-degree angle. So when this sits inside the loaf, it kind of folds in like that naturally. And it doesn't have any of your loaf getting stuck on the sides or anything like that, because it pretty much forms to the shape of the plant. Or your cups, or whichever shape whether it's a square or rectangular. We're going with rectangles right now, so that's how I'd go with 4 slits on each side. Sorry, 1 on each side. You could even do 2 at the same time, or you could fold them up like so. More or less a 45-degree angle. See that? And you just push it straight in. And there we go. Pretty straightforward. Now I have a 6-ounce ladle here. You can use as much or as little as you like. I like to cover the bottom all the way with probably a good 1/2-inch layer of the cake mix. And make sure it's gone down to all the 4 corners, so you may have to slip and slide a little bit, or you may want to do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, whatever works for you. So that one ladle works out perfectly for me. It covers the bottom off quite well. So we're gonna do that to all 3 of ours. This one just needs a little bit more. The cake mix is rather sticky, so you may want a heaped ladle. Also depends on your size pan that you're using, the ladle that you're using. All right. So we're done with the bottoms. So essentially what you want to do is, with your end product, you want a little row of apple pie filling in it when you slice through it. So when the bottom's done and completely covered, after you've given it a little tap, a little shake, make sure it's all covered in there, we're going to take a little bit of the apple pie filling, we're going to spoon it in right in the middle. We're going to make a little line in the middle. Not too much, because remember, after you bake this, it will ooze out a little bit. If you put just the right amount, it should contain it right within the loaf. And when you slice it, you'll have that nice stuffed loaf with the apple pie stuffing in there. So that's kind of like what it should look like. We're gonna do that to all 3 of ours. Some ice cream, warm it up. Warm apple pie filling with some nice chilled, well, frozen ice cream. It's a nice little treat. You can always use this up and make your own little apple crumbles. You could buy ready-made tart shells if you'd like, and make your own little apple pies as well. I like the little crushed variation of the apple pie as opposed to the sliced apples. It's just a personal preference. So once you have that row in there of apple pie filling, we're going to top it off with some more cake batter. This time when you're topping it off, just keep in mind the idea is to mainly cover the apple pie filling. So since our row of apple pie filling is in the middle, I'm going to aim for the middle. And all I'm doing is covering it up. I'm not looking to put too much of it. Our first ladle is just there to cover up all the apple pie filling. Alright, so we're almost done with this. Give it a little tap, a little shake, flatten it out. And now you're going to see that there are maybe some spots where the apple pie filling is just sticking out a little bit. You want to patch that up with a little more cake mix. And I like to fill these pans up halfway. That way the loaf doesn't come out of the shell when it's actually baked. So we're going to finish topping off these loaf pans and we're going to stick them in the oven. We're going to put it in the oven at 325. So we've baked our apple loaves or apple stuffed loaves. We've let it cool down thoroughly. I suggest cooling down all the way. Having these, slicing them when they're warm, it's a personal preference, I guess. They just slice a little nicer, I feel, when they're cooled down, but they do taste nicer when they're warm. So we're gonna slice this up. You can see that nice little apple stuffing in there in the middle. There we go. Not too much, just the right amount. So we're just going to slice these up. Right there. If you choose to, you could do a little glaze with it. I find this loaf is sweet enough, so I'm not a huge fan of it, but I do like to put a little bit of icing sugar just on top, just to dress it up just a little bit. And there's our apple stuffed loaf. Now we're going to prepare our butternut squash soup. Pretty standard fall soup to see on a lot of menus. Very simple to prepare and fairly quick as well. We're gonna dice our onions. You don't have to be too particular about how big or small it is. The larger it is, the longer it's gonna take to cook. So I'm just gonna dice these up. We're gonna get our pot on high. I think that's good enough. We're just gonna use 1.5 onions. Pot's not hot enough yet, so we're going to continue with our veg prep. Carrots, onion, celery, regular mirepoix or flavor builders in most soups that you'll have. Again, we're pureeing this soup, so we don't have to worry about the celery being cut too small or anything like that. We're going to finish off with our veg here, and the butternut squash itself is meant to be roasted. So we're going to use a little bit of TV magic here, but I will show you how to do it. We're using about 1.5 onions. using about 3 to 4 stalks of celery, and I would say 2 large carrots, peeled and diced. Again, I'm not too particular about what way I'm cutting them, as long as... So we have our pan heating up. It's nice and warm. Gonna put a little bit of oil in here. And add our flavor builders, our carrots, celery, and onions. The butternut squash, we've diced it, we placed it in a baking sheet, and we've baked it in the oven. We've given it a little bit of browning. We've added a little bit of potatoes just to help thicken the soup a little bit, but you can skip the potatoes entirely if you choose to. So we've gone with 2 whole butternut squash diced in the oven at about 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 to 25 minutes. Alright, we're gonna get our butternut squash out of the oven. Has a little bit of potato in there, along with the squash. We're gonna put it straight into our pot. We're gonna add a little bit of thyme. A little bit of salt, some black pepper, now it's starting to smell real good. Gonna have it on high heat. We're gonna pour in 1 liter of vegetable stock or chicken stock. Got our soup cooked off all the way, and we just pureed it all the way. Now we're just gonna portion it out. I like to finish off with a little bit of a sour cream swirl on top, so starting to boil real hard here. I also like a little bit of cream in my soup. You could skip this step, of course, but it gives it a nice color. I'm gonna take it off the stove. I'm just gonna stir that in. Portion out our pureed soup here. Over here I have a little bit of sour cream. I added a little bit of water to it. A little salt, pepper. I'm gonna finish it off with a little bit of dill. Dried dill is just fine for this application here. This is just going to be on top of the soup, so make sure it's thinner than your soup in consistency. It's a nice, thick butternut squash soup. And here's a little bit of sour cream dressing just on top to finish it off. And there you have our butternut squash soup with sour cream swirl.